Hello. So I thought we might make a quick video on the Chinese aspects of the Japanese art as viewed through the lens of the Bujinkan. Okay, now I had been the Bujinkan, it's been many years since I've been, but for about maybe 10 years at the time. And there was sort of a theme, a trend where some of the more Chinese elements of the arts, particularly the Gyokoryu, started to be talked about and stressed. And I think that makes Gyokoryu and Kotoryu also, but just in general, those Gendai arts much more effective. And I'm going to share with you why. There's a tendency in some of the more orthodox postures in the old Japanese Koryu arts to be in a very linear position, which works well under some conditions. But when you're actually fighting with somebody in a close encounter, there are times when you want to be able to use all your weapons, meaning that your orientation with your shoulders should be a little bit more forwards. For example, let's see, we'll go here. Nah, this is better. Okay. In Jumonji no Kamae, in this position, not this position, you're here because really, in a sense, what you want to do is come forwards. In order to come forwards, it's important to have your weapons in front of you to fight with, okay? This principle can apply universally. We're just taking an example. But if I'm trying to hit you, other things being equal, the things I have access to should be readily accessible, right? So for example, if I did something like Jumonji this way, it kind of defeats the purpose, because now I don't have both my hands in a position where I can attack you as readily. Now, another aspect to this is our feet. The Chinese aspects tend to round out your body position a little bit more, which I think helps you generate power a lot more effectively, okay? And I'll show you that as well. Let's see if I can get a good angle here. It's a little tricky. We'll try this. So, in this position, if you can see my feet, look at the distance between my feet. That's the important thing. Let me see if I can set this up a little better so it's easier to see such. Try this here. All right, let's do this. Pay attention to the distance between the feet. So, if I'm in a position like such, there's no distance between my heels, okay? It's essentially a linear position. And the problem with that is using the rotation of my spine to generate strength is limited, okay? On the other hand, if I round that out and I put some distance between my heels, okay, and again, this is not an orthodox way that the Bujinkan does this, okay, this is the way I do it. It's a preference. So now with that distance, if I'm doing something like Gyokoryu, Shitojutsu of a sort, right? When I rotate my spine, I have a lot more power, okay? There's a lot more strength I can generate from these positions by sinking a little bit, but primarily through rotating my spine properly, keeping my base where it is. Don't ever turn this, okay? You don't really want to turn this. You want to create, think of yourself as a tank, and this as a turret, okay? It also gives you nice mobility, okay? Because in this position now, when you start to look at different possible angles that you want to move, you have a lot more stability in any position with your feet because you're not in a line where you can be knocked over because of the position of your heels, okay? Now, the reason this is something that may have changed over time or what have you is when you're dealing especially with long-range weapons, you don't really consider that as much. Your distance is much more a factor. And at a distance where something like this, okay, and the person is about 10 feet away, then it's not so important that my heels reflect some stability in my positioning where I can move with maximal spinal rotation, okay? But it is important because boxing systems are boxing systems, and they're designed at some level or another to attack the person at sword lengths, 3 feet, and in from that, okay? And if I'm here and I'm attacking, there's 2 knives. If I'm here and I'm attacking, there's 1 knife. Now, you may not want to attack a person all the time. There are other aspects of when and how you attack, but I'm saying all things being equal, if you want to have an effective boxing position regarding your opponent, at least sometime in that process, you want to think about having the access to your hands and your feet and your weapon in a way that you have full access. You can use all of your gifts to bear, okay? Does it also apply to some of the other arts? Not so much in the Dokken stuff, okay? Which is basically a very, and not so much in the Gikenryu. These are systems that you're really depending on the structure of a chain, okay? Of the kinetic chain, it's sometimes called, to be effective. So you take for granted that you generate your strength from a position where you have room to step and move. And it's really about shifting your weight. And so this is a rock. Okay, it's got weight, and you're taking and you're shifting through a whole movement sequence as you do that. But for Kotoryu, it certainly applies. Even though Kotoryu is a form of Kopo, it's really done better when you're light on your feet, okay? And it's the same kind of thing. You may be using a little bit different angle than the Gyokoryu. Some people would argue that, some people wouldn't. But by being light, when you are really stepping forwards with your weight and giving yourself a little bit more rotation, more for the sinking and rising than a spinal rotation in this case, but it still has the same qualities of making you more effective, okay? So if I'm here and I'm doing some sort of a Kotoryu technique, there's some spinal flexion there, but by giving me that little roundness in my base, it creates more power. At least I think it does. Because Chinese arts are best done when you're light on your feet, my belief. Chinese boxing styles, okay? And I guess the best analogy is if you cook something that's very rich and you just throw a lot of cream in it, it tastes good, but later people kind of don't feel so good. It's just too rich, it's too heavy. If you cook something that's very rich with a lot of flavor, but you use your cream sparingly, your ingredients properly, it has a lightness to it, okay? And Kotoryu, even though it's a bone art, both figuratively, having the knack to knock somebody down, the understanding of the bone structure and how strong it is, but also literally, in order to have power that way, it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of distance in your heels, okay, as you go through those movements. Anyway, something to keep in mind. Hope this is helpful to you. Yes.